Hey guys, Colin Elam again, aka the Musket Man, and I am back for episode 6 of Gun Table Talk. And today I've brought out probably my personal favorite cap and ball revolver, the 1858 Remington New Model Army. Now, a bunch of you guys out there that know about cap and ball revolvers, you know that is the wrong terminology. The 1858, if you hear that in the name, that was the patent date. So that's not part of the name. Like you see it on the Walker too, the 1847 model Walker. That was, more of kind of its patent year, I guess you could say. It's just the year model they chose. But that, if you see people say the 1858 Remington New Model Army, just know that's an improper terminology to describe it. It would have been described as the Remington Army revolver or the Remington New Army revolver. Like I said, the 1858 is just the patent date. So from 1858 all the way, I believe, till 1875, they were producing these. Now, some of you may be wondering, why is it called the New Model Army? Well, I'm glad you asked. That's why you joined me today, to learn something. So, on the Remingtons, when they had come out, it looked almost exactly like this. Almost no different. Now, some of you know where I'm going with this. But if any of you gun gurus can see, what is the difference between the cylinder and the barrel and frame here? You guessed it. It's been fluted on both sides, and it's kind of hard to see, where you can see the threads of the barrel when they screwed it into the frame. The old model Remingtons, they were flat. As you can see, it's fluted. These were flat, so you kind of had the cylinder rubbing on the frame, metal rubbing on metal. And again, a bunch of you guys know where I'm going with this. So you already have friction there. So what happens with black powder guns when you shoot them? That's right, very thick fouling. So what would happen, typically after the first 6 shots, that's a lot of fouling, 6 shots worth of black powder. It was not uncommon for that cylinder to get fouled up in the frame. So now, probably after your 6, maybe 8 shots, your gun's fouled up. Now you can't shoot it. So they went back to the drawing board because they loved the design. Everything else worked. And all they did was just flute the frame just to get rid of some of that metal to allow the fouling, instead of the fouling blowing out like this, it now blows out the sides and forward, lessening the amount of fouling on the cylinder and the frame, thus keeping the gun moving and improving the overall performance. So that's why you hear the New Model Army. You can still buy the old model guns. I believe Dixie Gun Works and others sell them. You can buy the old models if you choose. So right off the bat, I'll show you again, there is a major difference to all the cap and ball revolvers I've gone over in this series so far. Can anybody guess what it is? Pretty easy. That's right. It is a solid frame cap and ball revolver. All the other guns up until this point were open tops. So the Remington New Model Army was the first to come out with a solid frame. So now you had a much stronger frame that could handle pressures more, and you were less worried about blowing your barrel or wedge out or damaging the gun, because now it is a lot more sturdy and tight now. So that was another big deal that came out about that. It was the first to really come on the scene. There's the Spiller and Bird. That's another one that was a solid frame gun. And it wasn't long after these came out. That's, guns later, that's where they knew they had to go with solid frames versus open tops. Now, some differences. Well, if you've seen all my latest videos, the 1860 Army, the Walker, the Dragoon, the 1851 Navy, what's the problem after you take 6 shots? You're empty. Well, like I've discussed on the Pattersons, the Texas Rangers were known to carry an extra cylinder, take the barrel off, throw their old cylinder down, empty one, and put a loaded one back on. All right. So basically, Remington took that same idea, and they made it to where this gun can have a brand new loaded cylinder loaded real quick without disassembling the firearm. And I will demonstrate. So as you can see, the cylinder pin is held in by the loading lever. So they did that so you could simply do this. Half cocks, freeze up the cylinder, lower the loading lever, pull your wedge forward, cylinder pops out. So after your 6 shots, you're empty. Guys would carry maybe 1 or 2 more of these. You now got a loaded cylinder, and you would simply just, well, come on now. And sometimes it can be a little finicky. Just take some practice. Oh, come on now. Oh, pardon me, guys. Let me get that on there real quick. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. And, well, goodness. There we go. So it popped back on. Now I know what you are thinking. Well, that's a lot harder than I thought it was. Well, back then, you wanted a gun that could reload relatively quick. And with the older guns, after you took your 6 shots, you hoped you had paper cartridges, but more often than not on the Frontier, you didn't have that option. You had to load with loose powder and ball and cap. So that was hard, especially if you were in a fight or in a situation you needed it. But even with that it was kind of finicky getting that cylinder back in. Once you got it back in, you had 6 shots ready to go like that. Versus the guy carrying the 1851 Navy, he's still loading the powder and the patch ball, trying to get his cap on for just 1 chamber, and you're like, dude, I've already got 6 more shots. So that was a huge game changer for handguns and reloading speed. So that was the first gun also to have that option to do that. So your reload time is now a lot faster. Now some of you are going, well, what if you don't have a spare cylinder? Then that's true. If you didn't have a spare cylinder, then you were back to square one. Unless you had paper cartridges, you had to load with loose powder. So, but you had that option. So for military use, or if you were a guy that had some money and you had this on the Frontier, that was a huge advantage for you. Very huge. What are some other things that goes on? Well, for one, the disassembly of this gun is very easy. It's a little bit less parts than the 1860 Armies or the 51 Navies, just by a little bit. But there was another problem that all the cap and ball revolvers up until this point had. Well, is how to safely carry it. Now, some of you know where I'm going with this. More often than not, there was no safety with these guns. Your safety was not pulling the trigger when the hammer's cocked. That was your safety. So what did they do? Well, it wouldn't have been uncommon for them to lower the hammer on a loaded chamber on top of a cap. That's dangerous, and I do not recommend doing that, by the way. If that is the way you're carrying these guns, you need to stop doing that, because it takes one hit on the table, riding a horse, something, and that gun is going to go off in your holster, hit your leg, or scare everybody, make you look dumb. Don't do it. So the Walker, the Patterson, the Dragoon series, 51 Navies, the 49 Pocket, the 1860 Army, the 1861 Army or Navy, they didn't have that. Now, some of you are going, well, wait a minute, Colin, I've got a Pieta or a Uberti 1851, and it's got little notches in the back of the cylinder that I can safely lower that hammer and have 6 loaded. You would be correct. That is right. The reproductions have that. The original firearms did not. Even up to the cartridge era, you didn't have that. A lot of the guns didn't have that luxury, so you just had to be really smart, know what you were doing, and carry them safely. So where I'm going with this is, if you can see at the back of the cylinder, there is cutouts between each chambers. And that is what that's for. And they're all around the cylinder. So naturally, put it in half cock, freeze up the cylinder. So let's say you've loaded your gun up, you've got it all ready to go, and naturally you want to lower the hammer. Well, naturally, if you know anything about single actions, you got to cock it all the way back first. That's where you really got to know your thumb and finger safety with these guns. That's where you got to really know that. And you would slowly lower your lever. What happens? It's setting on an empty chamber. That's the whole problem here. So what you do, just barely pull it back to where it releases the cylinder. And you drop it on one of them slots. And as you can see, if you can see pretty good, it is not resting on a chamber and it won't move. So now you can safely, without a shadow of a doubt, hold 6 rounds without anything happening, without it going off, an accidental discharge, a misfire. And simply, when you're ready, pull it out, gun's ready to go. So now you can safely have 6 loaded. Now, I'm sure the originals, you could set it between the chambers, the hammer, but that cylinder could still move, it's possible to set off a cap that would have half the bullet going out the side of the frame and down the barrel, which could break your gun or harm you, or possible death. But back then, that's the risk you had to take. But with this gun, you no longer had to worry about that anymore. So, that's more of the history about the gun, kind of what I've gone over, giving you some details about it. If you are looking for one of these, in my opinion, it is my favorite cap and ball revolver. Highly recommend it. The overall performance is a lot better. Because of its design, you're going to have way less cap jams. And if you look again in the back of the cylinder, look how wide it is from the back of the cylinder to the frame. So when you cock it, bam, shoot it, that cap's going to fall off to the side every time, that busted cap. There's nothing it can really get hung up in the back. So it almost eliminated cap jams. But naturally with cap and ball revolvers, you will have a cap jam eventually. Even if you're carrying a Rogers and Spencer, eventually you will get a cap jam. But this minimized it very little. So your overall performance and firing rate was a lot better. So if you're in a gunfight and you're shooting, that one guy's like, cap jam, you're like, sorry, you beat him. So that was a big game changer. So enough more, still talking about the gun, but I want to move on to something better. So I've had this gun about 8 months. I got it at the Lubbock Gun Show, which is where I'm from. And I was fortunate enough to find it for a very good price. And it was part of my gun list that I want to own. But there was a catch that the guy had. He goes, it comes with a conversion cylinder. Now, some of you guys that know these conversion cylinders are awesome. This is a 45 Colt conversion cylinder made for this Remington New Model Army. So as you can see, it's just got a back plate with 6 individual firing pins. So it simply just comes out. As you can see, there's a little pin that lines up with the back plate here. And you load your 45 Colt loaded cartridges, 6 of them. When you've got it loaded, you simply just pop it back on. And the same way I took the cylinder off, you put this one on. Now you have 6 cartridges if you want to shoot smokeless powder cartridges, or if you want to shoot black powder cartridges. You now have that option to do that without using loose powder or paper cartridges. And let me tell you, these conversion cylinders can be a little pricey depending on who you get it from. I got this gun, which is in fantastic shape, with the conversion cylinder for a steal. So it's just one of those finds you couldn't refuse. Now, as far as conversion cylinders go, you can get them for your 1860 Army, your 51 Navy, your Walker, your Dragoon series, and other cap and balls and revolvers too, even the Rogers and Spencer. I highly recommend them, especially if you don't want to do all the cleaning at the end of the day, but you still have the option of black powder if you'd want to do that. Now you have best of both worlds. So as far as solid frame goes, you don't have to worry about anything with the cartridges. Now, you still need to be shooting cowboy loads. You don't need to be shooting home defense or anything like that, even though it is a solid frame. You don't want to do that, especially if you're shooting any open top frame guns. If you're using a conversion cylinder, do not load any hot loads in there whatsoever, and the manuals will even tell you that. Just thought I'd throw that out there. But I thought I would throw that in there since that came with the gun. So I thought it was pretty cool. But anyway, guys, if you're looking for a cap and ball revolver, the 1858 Remington, not the proper terminology, but that's how most people know it. It is one of my favorites, and it is a great find, and it's great for your collection. Highly recommend it. Well, guys, I'm about to run out of time. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Gun Table Talk, talking about the Remington New Model Army. Anyway, guys, I should have another episode next week. And as always, I'm the Musket Man. Keep your powder dry, and we will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.